Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex, and today I want to talk about Marvel Contest of Champions because I want to make a comparison between Marvel Future Fight and Marvel Contest of Champions, and I think that they are the perfect target because in terms of the size of Marvel games and also the longevity, Contest of Champions is sort of the big brother to Marvel Future Fight. Now, you could argue that Strike Force might be a bit more popular at the moment than Marvel Future Fight, or you could also argue that Marvel Strike Force makes more money than Marvel Future Fight, but it hasn't been around for nearly as long. Contest of Champions has been around for about 6 months longer than Marvel Future Fight, so they just celebrated their 5-year anniversary at the end of 2019. We are going to celebrate the 5-year anniversary of this game in April, the end of April, early May, so they're really only about 6 months apart. And the games do get compared to each other a lot, and I'm not actually making this video to bash one game or another or say that, you know, one game is better than the other and yada yada yada. I am going to make a comparison, but I'm going to do it hopefully to improve maybe some of the developer communication between our devs, Marvel Future Fight devs, and the players, because what you're going to see from the Contest of Champion devs and their communication really is going to hopefully blow your mind, because it blew my mind. Now, as far as Marvel Contest of Champions goes as a game, I will be the first one to admit that once upon a time, when I first started my YouTube channel, and also when I first started getting into mobile games, which is honestly around the time, you know, maybe a year before I started my channel, is when I really started playing mobile games. I never played mobile games growing up. Well, growing up, we didn't have mobile games. We just had regular cell phones that dialed numbers and made phone calls. You could send messages, but that was it. You could play like Snake on your phone. But anyways, so I didn't grow up with mobile games. You know, Clash of Clans was the first mobile game that I really got into, and then shortly after, but that game was already kind of waning by that time. And then shortly after that, I tried Marvel Future Fight. But for the first couple years of playing Marvel Future Fight, I saw Marvel Contest of Champions as this like joke of a game, and I thought that the game was silly because it wasn't a game where you press skills and you do things with the characters and you move the characters. The characters are kind of stuck on this track, and you can only either move them forwards or backwards. It's very two-dimensional in that sense, and the characters just do tapping and swiping effects. And I kind of still think that a lot of tapping and swiping games are a bit simplistic, and I'm not personally a big fan of that type of game, but I've really come to appreciate a lot of the nuance and a lot of the complexity of a game like Marvel Contest of Champions. So I will be the first one to tell you that I was wrong about my initial impressions and my initial reactions to Marvel Contest of Champions. It's a very deep game. It's a very complicated game. It's a very skill-based game. It's a very challenging game. And it's actually a good game. It might not be the game for you. It's not necessarily the game for me, but there's plenty of great games out there that I don't play that aren't for me, but they're still great games. Now, the comparison I want to make today involves a very, very recent community post that Contest of Champions put up. I got to show you this, guys, because this is insane. So before I show you this community post that they put up, that someone that works for Kabam being like our version of Netmarble, before I show this to you guys, I want you to think about and try to remember, how was the communication before we got the rework for Hyperion? How was the communication before we got the rework for Vision? You know, they put up the poll, the survey, asking us who we wanted to be reworked, and then they put up a link to the poll here in the sort of the scrolling banner, and that was basically it. And then we voted, and then they announced the winner. And you know, in each case, it was either Hyperion or Vision. And then we waited, and we waited, and we waited, and we waited, and then they also sent a post out publicly saying, "Hey guys, don't worry, we're still working on it." And then eventually we got the reworks for Hyperion and Vision, yay! And that was it. And we were just like, okay, I guess. And then we had to judge, right? The star agents and the players had to judge whether these reworks were sufficient enough. And that's it. And, you know, whenever a character gets buffed or gets nerfed, usually, and characters very rarely get nerfed, but usually it's just like, oh, there was a miscalculation, or something was going wrong. There's like a one-sentence explanation for why a character is being changed, whether they're being buffed or whether they're being nerfed. So imagine all that. Now I want you to take a look at this. This was posted by Kabam Mike, who's the guy who, like, you know, posts all this stuff and communicates with the players of Contest of Champions. They are talking about the timeline for the release, so they're giving the players an idea of when these changes are going to happen. They're giving you more information here. They're giving you more information. This post here doesn't even talk about the balance changes, and it's already this long. Now, For each individual character that's getting reworked, you have a different link to a different post. I'm going to take Namor, for example. Namor, in this case, in Contest of Champions, is getting a bit of a nerf, okay? But look at this post. Like, listen, this is a lot, okay? So they summarize the champ, and they explain what makes the character what makes the character good. They come to some conclusions about the playstyle of the character. They talk about what their goals are with the changes. This is like a PowerPoint presentation. This is like something that, you know, you put together as part of a project for like a university course or something like that. Check this out. Data. Look at these graphs, okay? In Realm of Legends, which is one of the game modes in Contest of Champions, Namor can reach his maximum damage potential before killing his opponent, and you can see it is far better than any other character in the game. So there's Namor, and there's every other character in the game. But look at all this, man. Look at all this data. I mean, I know it's just y-axis and x-axis, and it's just like a little bit of, you know, stuff. But seriously, it gets crazier. There's more data. Here's more data on his regen, the amount that he regenerates the HP. Here's more data on Here's more data on what Namor can do in Alliance War. So this is another game mode where they're tracking Namor's performance. Again, I don't know how they get this information, but they're able to pull this information from actual players playing the game, and then they're able to average it out, and then they're able to compare it to other champions, other characters in the game. Look at all this data that they're able to not only access, presumably quite easily, but they're sharing this data with the players. This is just one. There's 6 characters who are getting changes. Let's go take a look at Annihilus. Annihilus is a character that we ask for in Marvel Future Fight. Look at this. They have details of when he is attacked in as a defender, I guess presumably in Alliance War, what happens. So this would be similar to, let's say, you know, how often does anyone's Jean Grey win as a defender in Alliance Conquest or in Timeline Battle. Whenever you fight a Jean Grey and you encounter them, how often do you beat them? How often are they undefeated? And so on and so forth. Look at all this. Look at all this data. This is absolutely mind-blowing. I'm not showing this to you guys to actually try to go through the data and make sense of the data, because I don't know that much about Contest of Champions, and it wouldn't really make sense anyways because we don't play Contest of Champions. But I mean, some of you play Contest of Champions, but holy shit, this is insane. Look at this. They give you the exact stats. They give you the exact numbers, the percentages. They give you seconds. They give you all this stuff. They give it to you in 2 decimal places. Everything is shown. Now, you know, immediately there are some ways of explaining why they're going into such heavy detail with these changes. Part of the reason why they go into such heavy detail with all these changes for Contest of Champions is because of the acquisition method for most characters. They have to be very careful. The people who make Contest of Champions have to be very, very careful not to piss off the player base by making changes to characters without explaining the changes, because the only way to get changes, the only way to get characters in Marvel Contest of Champions is either to grind for them, which takes weeks and takes, you know, a huge roster and takes a lot of effort, or you have to throw cash and you have to pay, right? It's a gacha game. It's one of those games where you are hoping to get a specific character, and you're just pulling from a pool of characters, like you've probably seen or you've heard about, you know, Seaton doing his Cavalier pulls, whatever, 20, 30 tries for this character, that character. That's how it works. So every single character on someone's roster, if they didn't grind for that character or they didn't get that character through some sort of event, if they paid for that character has a dollar amount associated with them. Now, there are characters like that in Marvel Future Fight. Absolutely, there are characters like that, like Namor and others, but the amount of money that you pay is much, much lower. Much lower. I mean, 1 crystal in Contest of Champions costs as much as a bio sub or an X-Gene sub. So unless you're God, unless you have like God tier luck and you're pulling that character with the very first crystal every single time, there's no way that the cost is equal. So there probably isn't a single player in Marvel Contest of Champions that if they paid money to get Namor, they paid less than $10. There's just absolutely no way. So it's way more expensive on average to get characters in Marvel Contest of Champions, and so that's part of the reason why they have to be so careful with how they present changes, buffs, and nerfs, because players have indirectly invested, you know, tens, hundreds, thousands of dollars in those characters. But on top of that, it's just part of the culture. That's really what it comes down to as well, because I'm sure if the players didn't really care about this information, and if they hadn't made it clear to the devs that they wanted this information, then the devs might try to get away with not giving that information in the first place. I can't say that for certain. I'm just speculating, but of course, if your community has a positive reaction and has, you know, a good back and forth, and there's good communication about things like this, and if they're mature enough to look at these and sort of try to understand the point of view from the developers side of things, they're not necessarily, well, I mean, you could argue about why they're nerfing these characters or why they're changing them, but you know, to go to this much work, to go to this much trouble to change a character, and then for it to just be about money and be about like scamming the players, it's a little bit of a stretch. I'm sure there's more involved here. I'm sure the devs are a little bit more passionate about the game to just try to squeeze more money out of players. That's the marketing part of the job, the people who work in the marketing. Now, you know, there could be some cross between the two, and of course, you know, seasoned Marvel Contest of Champions players might disagree with me there, and I don't have as much information, so I can't say, of course. But you know, at the same time, you have to give a little bit of respect that all this was written up, all of this was provided, you know, and the initiative was taken by the developers. It's not like the players were like, these characters haven't even been nerfed yet, by the way. These are changes that they're going to make. So if you think about it from that perspective, they're coming out ahead of the changes and saying, look at the data. This is what we want to do. Now compare that to Marvel Future Fight. Hey guys, Quicksilver was, there was a bug where Quicksilver was attacking too many times. We're going to change that. Now his fourth skill deals 50% less damage. Okay, bye. That was all we got. We got like a two-sentence, one-line explanation for why Quicksilver was so overpowered, you know, like a year ago. And then he suddenly lost like 25-30% efficiency. And then a few months later, Luna Snow got a uniform that pushed her arguably ahead of him with the Andromeda suit. Now, that is a little bit more fishy in my opinion. So I am of the type, and I am of the kind of player that wants the most amount of information possible. There's still so many questions in Marvel Future Fight that we don't have. How does all defense down work? How does ignore defense work? How do you calculate certain damages? How do certain buffs interact with each other or not? You know, characters having accumulation on their skills and they have a CTP of authority. Do those things stack or not? Penetration on a character and penetration on an obelisk and a CTP of destruction, does it stack or does it not stack? There are so many, like, I just rattled off 5 questions, and I have so many more questions that I would love to know, and we just don't get them. So I would really be amazed if the Marvel Future Fight team could try to do a little bit more of that sort of thing. I don't want them to just copy what Contest of Champions is doing, but, you know, we do get more character buffs, I think, in Marvel Future Fight than they do in Contest of Champions. I could be wrong about that, but if you include all of the updates where we get uniforms for characters, let's say, you know, last update they did a general rebalancing of Vision, but they also indirectly buffed Rogue with a uniform. Now, some players might want to see more buffs for characters without uniforms, like a base kit buff to just the character generally speaking, like they did to Hyperion, etc. But you can't argue with the results. They really improved Rogue in a huge way. Am I asking them to do like a huge write-up for why Rogue was trash before they gave her this Uncanny Avengers uniform? No. I mean, it was pretty obvious to any player that she was pretty trash. Her damage was low, her attacks were slow, the targeting was bad, just like everything top to bottom was just bad. So things like that, of course, you're not looking for more clarity. But there are so many more things in Marvel Future Fight that deserve more clarity, and the devs giving more clarity on these things and showing that they're really passionate about these things, that they really know what they're talking about. That's kind of a common joke in Marvel Future Fight, unfortunately, that we're kind of questioning whether the devs play this game on a deep enough level, because some of the decisions that they make for characters and some of the skills and some of the combinations of skills and synergies leave us scratching our heads. Most of the time they get it right, but some of the times it's so off, you're like, you didn't give Voodoo poison damage? Huh? You really didn't give Voodoo any poison. Wow. So I would really encourage the devs to take a page out of the Contest of Champions devs book and give us a little bit more insight into your thinking and your thought process for why you're creating a character a specific way, why you're giving a specific character a uniform. The sneak peeks are nice, the patch notes are great, but just a little bit more would really go a long way, and maybe possibly some kind of road mapping for what you want to do in the future that you haven't yet had a chance to do. So, you know, our objective for 2020, or our objective for the next 3 months, our objective for the next 6 months is to work on these things generally. You don't even have to be specific. You could just say we're working on some game modes, or we're working on some of this, or we're looking at some of that, or whatever. Yeah, I'm just trying to encourage a better state of communication between the players and the devs. And also, I want to just maybe get a little bit more, not maybe, I do want to get more detailed information and more data about characters and character changes and character buffs and rebalancings that we currently don't have in Marvel Future Fight. And then hopefully also some of those answers to those really crucial questions that players in the community could be spending more money if they knew the answer to those questions, you know. So all of these things, not only do they help the developers and not only do they help the players, but they also have the secondary or tertiary effect of possibly generating more revenue for the game devs. I don't think they're going to generate less revenue. So it's just a matter of them wanting to do it and having the time to do it and having the manpower, the human power in terms of having enough employees to do it. So anyways, that's my Contest of Champions Marvel Future Fight comparison rant. What did you think of that crazy data that they're throwing out there to justify changes, nerfs and buffs? Not just nerfs, also buffs to characters. Do you think they should ever consider nerfing characters in Marvel Future Fight, or should they just focus on buffing other characters up? Hit me up in the comments down below. Let me know what you think. Also, let me know if you watch and you play Contest of Champions. I do try to follow stuff with Seaton, with Contest Champion, Brian Grant, stuff like that. But I don't actually play myself. I dabbled for a little bit, but I didn't have time. I didn't have the grind in me to play so many different games every day for months on end. So yeah, that's a little bit of history about me. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.